welcome to the stage Chief Analyst with Google Threat Intelligence Group, John Hultquist, and former Special Assistant to the President, Acting Homeland Security Advisor, and former NSA Cybersecurity Director, Rob Joyce.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Hultquist. This is Rob Joyce. Rob has asked me not to do a real long-winded introduction of his background, but I will say that as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, Rob is somebody that I look to for advice, and especially when it comes to the forward-leaning problems, right? Sort of looking beyond the horizon. It's really easy in our business to get stuck in the now and the tactical, especially when everything's always on fire, and miss sort of what's going on beyond the horizon or what's coming down the road. It's also easy to sort of get caught up in the hype, right? And I've been doing this for a long time. There's been a lot of hype. There's a lot of sort of predicted game changers, especially along the lines of technology. What things that were game changers and what things were not as game changers as you thought they'd be in your experience?
Wow. So good morning, everybody. I think some of the big things have been the movement we've seen in supply chain is really starting to worry me. We haven't seen enormous amounts of supply chain hits, and I think we'll talk to some of that today. But the other is the aggression that's come at us, whether it's nation state or some of the criminal activity, but all of those have focused in hard and really continued to evolve. I think we're doing a lot better as defenders, but the gap between attackers and defenders continues to kind of grow.
Now, do you think that we're forcing changes for the adversary, that they're reacting to us and our growth, or is it just technology that's acting as the real driver of change, or even geopolitics?
No, it's all of the above, John. So we certainly have gotten better. If you look at what it takes to exploit the most used technology now, browsers and cell phones, they are so much stronger today. And it just takes exploit chain together in multiple paths to get to success. So we've raised the game on the defense. We've gotten so much better at everything from vulnerability management, patch management, to the threat intel that warns us about the big groups and the trends. So all of that has advanced us. At the same time, we've evolved the attackers through that activity. I think by calling out some of the bad behavior, by highlighting the things that have worked or not worked, we've pushed people into new exploit methodology, and you'll see that advance. Just the idea of all of the AI-driven exploit technology that's being experimented with today. They're going there not because they think that's going to be the best. It's because we're closing down all of these avenues time after time that they've got to keep evolving to stay ahead.
All right, well, that's a great segue into AI. Not long ago, you were telling folks, or you told me, or somewhere I heard from you that AI wasn't yet the game-changing capability, and we shouldn't sort of overestimate its impact. I actually used a quote of yours in presentations to like calm the room down, right? Do you still feel the same? Is AI a bigger threat now?
No, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and I am always optimistic about our ability to defend and stay ahead. But man, I have gotten to be Debbie Downer in the AI world a bit.
Okay.
So if you talked to me 2 years ago, probably when you got that quote from me, I was very focused on all of the social engineering aspects of AI because I really thought that's where the impact was going to come. We've lived through the era of Nigerian prince emails where it's a really bad email, it's got spelling mistakes, it's got issues throughout the kind of the storyline. And the lowest common denominator would at times bite that hook. And that was just enough. But in the last year, I've watched some really sophisticated stuff. And where's the bar today? Well, in one case, I saw an email chain, not one email, but this chain that started with a company winning a bid and then delivering on the contract and then trying to get paid and having an issue and then somebody referring them to a different person in the company to help and then finally somebody in authority saying fix this, pay the bill, and then it getting into accounts receivable where they have to pay it. And that whole thread from start to finish was LLM AI generated. And it had the right names, it was in context, and they didn't just create the last one that said pay the bill. They created the whole backstory that went with it, and it was really, truly impressive, right?
So how can threat actors use AI outside of the sort of social engineering context?
Yeah, so that's where I crossed the chasm, right? And so we have checks and balances to deal with the social engineering stuff. It's still very successful. But now, if you look, AI is getting to be this extraordinary software writer, right? We've all heard about the vibe coding revolution, and scared by will it introduce flaws that will be exploitable? But I'm watching that AI that's writing software is really good at finding and fixing bugs because it has to. If it's going to successfully write software, it has to know what bugs are and how to find them. Well, that's the basis for finding vulnerabilities to exploit. So now the AI tools, and you watch, the Google Project Zero team has got some extraordinary technologies now to scan code bases and find vulnerabilities. OpenAI is doing similar things, right? And that is the fundamental starting point to make exploits, is finding exploitable bugs. And the AI is capable of doing that. And so, some set of folks will say, that's wonderful. We're going to have LLMs scanning all of our software and finding bugs at scale and patching it before the bad guys can get leverage. Well, the problem with that theory is we suck at patching, right? And so, if these machines are generating tons and tons of vulnerabilities, great, my Google Chrome is going to be patched before I know there's a problem. My underlying operating systems are probably going to be patched as long as I allow auto patching. But there's so much technology in our ecosystem now that's either unsupported or legacy, or doesn't have the person who's going to install the patch. And I think that stuff's going to burn. And we may see the equivalent of a West Coast firestorm that has to burn things to the ground for us to build up stronger and better. And so that's one of the areas that I said the AI revolution's kind of scaring me. The second big area is, if you just watch what AI is able to do in the hacking contest today, it's phenomenal. So you do HackerOne bug bounties. And HackerOne, for those of you that don't know, is a company that crowdsources pen testing against your ecosystem. And you sign on to allow people to try to scan your networks and find vulnerabilities. It works really well in that they bring a lot of talent and a lot of different techniques to test your defenses and find it, hopefully, before the adversaries do. Well, for the last several months, the number one hacker on HackerOne is not a person anymore. They keep a leaderboard of who's scoring the most points, finding the most vulnerabilities, and earning the most bounties. The number one hacker is Xbow, Xbow, an agentic AI that is just relentless, right? It is going after these networks, and it jiggles every doorknob everywhere, constantly, and it finds more vulnerabilities and flaws than any human who has to sleep, eat, and spend time with their loved ones. And so that's what it's showing, is these AI agents will be able to continuously come at you, and when new vulnerabilities are discovered, and we know those happen every day, they can immediately start to turn that before the defensive teams can come in and close the door.
So that's a question of almost persistence and speed, right? Like the ability to always be sort of working against the network, and then when you're in the network, to move and sort of pivot across the network quickly. And I think the vulnerability is almost a question of scale. What about targeting of our AI systems specifically, though? As we sort of adopt, these systems, are there any inherent risks, we refer, that are sort of we're adopting into our tech stacks?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in this race to put agentic AI bolted onto everything.
Yeah.
The LLM world is not deterministic. And so, you can come at it 4 times and in a malicious way, and it'll recognize it and stop it. But it may be that if you come at it 40 ways, that one of those is exploitable. And when you've bolted agentic AI onto, let's say, if your company has a travel system and you've decided instead of going out to a travel agent, you're going to use agentic AI to find and book your flights. Well, me as an attacker, I could certainly find a way to make Joyce Airlines the cheapest, most effective with all the routes you could ever want, and convince your company that they should be sending all the business to Joyce Airlines. That's an attack that we are absolutely going to see, right? I bet somebody, I think we're 3 months in now, that we're going to see the North Koreans get really good at attacking AI systems.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's money there, right? And they have shown that they're really creative.
Yeah.
Right? They go after the crypto in so many different ways because they can monetize that. I think they're going to be able to monetize our use of AI in a lot of these companies. So I've got about 9 months left, whether I'll have to pay up on that bet or not. So we'll see. I know the North Koreans pay attention to stuff you say, so you can nudge them that way, John, and save me.
Yeah. So are these like input output issues? Are we going to have to? How do you even monitor these things, or how do you even deal with it? Is it a governance problem or a technology problem, or?
Well, I think you've got to think about AI like an insider, right? By installing agents, we've given agency to this thing in the company that has the ability to do things on your behalf. And so we got to consider, what are you going to do? What are you going to give them in terms of roles and authority? And then how do you have checks and balances around it? And with humans, you build processes to make sure that they're compliant and not rogue inside your system anyway. And we're going to have similar things. There are technologies that will provide Overwatch, but I do believe that it's going to be belt and suspenders as well. The other interesting thing, there's been some examples recently of AI being exploited inside a company where it's a traditional hack and exploitation to get access inside the systems of a company. But then they're using the AI agents to search for the things that would be most useful in a ransomware attack or an extortion attack. So you've got an AI system plugged into your knowledge bases, and it's there to help your company with all the things Maybe you've given it access to all of the emails. Well, we're seeing the first malware come in that runs LLM queries against your data to find the things that they would most like to weaponize against.
Yeah, I guess that'd be a real help for an extortion problem, right?
Yeah.
Which is essentially all ransomware is at this point, or that whole place, or that whole crime problem. What about AI for defense? Is there any good news?
Now, there is good news, right? And a lot of the attacks we've seen over the last few years have been this focus on identity, right? They want to get John's tokens or John's account, or create Sally, who isn't an employee, but if you can create an account with authorities to get access to the things they want. Those are the major ways that companies are being exploited. And, AI now gives us the ability, just like we talked about the exploitation being unrelenting and continuous, you can get AI to watch your kind of your tradecraft inside the network, what's normal and what's abnormal. And it can stare with this unblinking eye and understand that when John comes in, you go to these 3 databases, you use these 2 services, and you move this amount of data typically. And when you spike outside those norms, that's a great use case for AI to flag that you are outside your traditional lanes, and maybe wonder whether it's really you or you've got a new role. But having that the noise of all the things on a network narrowed down to a few things to check is a useful thing. And that's not just LLMs, that's also traditional machine learning to form the baseline and then see the deviations. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the AI use cases for defense. And where that really comes to be exceptional is in places like the hyperscalers, where you have access to so much data. And then you can put together 2 unrelated, uncorrelated things that a human wouldn't have noticed, and bring them together and understand it's a new attack path, or it's the same actor trying something that's been successful in one place over in the other. And I think AI is going to scale to these massive repositories and massive ecosystems in ways that'll be super helpful.
So we talked for a minute about sort of AI enhanced intrusions or AI-powered intrusions, or that sort of are more persistent and faster. And to me, the solution seems to be, and maybe this is like, I'm trying to use this, or I'm overly focused on AI, but it seems to me that the focus or the answer may be AI to defeat AI.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all of those things that we talk about AI as an attacker, those are actually being developed successfully as AI as a red teamer. And one of the theories is you're just going to have to continuously red team yourself and find avenues of exploitation and close it down at machine speed, because the AI attackers will be doing the same thing, right? And in my old NSA days, I had a saying that I was fond of, which is, the only way to defend a network is to know a network, right? Because you are going to be probed, whether you like it or not, by those adversaries. And they will put in the work to know your network better than you do. And that's how they succeed. That's how we succeeded at NSA in our intelligence gathering, is we knew the network and the devices better than the people who installed and operated it. With AI, you can have that unblinking stare and know your network, not the as you wanted it to be, but the reality of as it's configured, shadow IT, and devices with the default passwords and all of those things that become the cracks and seams that let intruders in. Those are the things you can close down.
It seems, though, that we're potentially setting ourselves up for like a lot of offensive security tool, a proliferation event where a lot of offensive security tools might be out there, and sort of the folks who don't have the ability to leverage those will now be at the mercy of them. Is that a realistic scenario?
I think it's realistic, just because of the ability to scale with these AI techniques, right? And if you're in the sights of a nation state attacker, they're going to be relentless and focused on that objective. But many of the ransomware crews, they don't care who you are. They want to land inside and then figure out if you're worthy of extortion. Would you pay? And that's what we're going to see, is them being indiscriminate but very capable. And then once they land, figuring out, are you worthy of targeting?
We'll not just talk about AI for this whole thing. So I've got another question for you. So a tech that's sort of further out on the horizon, that for my whole career, just like AI, we've been hearing about. And I always told people my plan was to retire before quantum became a thing, so I didn't have to deal with it.
So
what do you think about quantum? You already retired. You feel like you made it.
Yeah, so it already is a thing, John, but it's not an active exploitation vector. So we're in an era where quantum computers are not theoretical, they're real. They just aren't as practical as they need to be. So it is coming from a world where it's an idea to it's an engineering problem at this point. Now, it's still a very hard engineering problem, right? You'll read articles about, somebody factoring RSA with a quantum computer, and the reality is that they dumb the problem down to a trivial point, that the true practical security is not impacted. But it's coming, and so when you hear about quantum breaking encryption, many people go immediately to the confidentiality of their information. So at that point, some people think about their attack scenarios and their threat model, and they say, all right, I don't care if it's years out, the confidentiality. Well, the thing we ought to all be focused on is many of our authentication protocols use public key cryptography in those authentications. And that's the use case I worry about, because that becomes the skeleton key into many, many networks and devices when a cryptographically relevant quantum computer exists. So, the government has told national security entities that by 2034 they need to be quantum resistant. The technologies are out there. NIST has run a competition and standardized a set of quantum resistant algorithms, and they're being put into the ecosystem. But step one today is figuring out where you have technologies that are vulnerable, and then starting to build the investment plan and the cycle time to get those out of your ecosystem. And 2034 in government time is lightning fast, right? In the commercial world is still pretty fast, but if you don't start today, it's going to come up on you pretty quick.
Excellent. You mentioned before we got started, or when we got started, about supply chain incidents. They're relatively rare, but they seem to have these large impacts. Are they inevitable? Are we doing enough to stop them?
Well, it's just such a hard problem, John. People focus. I remember years ago there was this grain of rice story about an implant that went into computers, and the Chinese were going to own everything. And I don't worry about that hardware implant for the mass market, because it's detectable and would be found. It's the software supply chain where you're patching all the time, you're accepting updates, you're getting things in that include components you know nothing about. And the NPM package manager issue is a good example. So we've had 3 distinct and different exploitations in the last 2 months, something like that we've discovered. And it impacted the supply chain of, in a couple cases, a handful of packages, and in another more than 500 packages that then go into the ecosystem and are picked up by many, many different pieces of software. Both of those were kind of near misses in that, they seem to be doing info stealer stuff and trying to get into the crypto supply chain and steal people's cryptocurrency. So they were, by most measures, unsuccessful, because I think they've stolen $800 worth of crypto. But those were the near misses that wake us up to say there's so much in this supply chain. One of those was achieved just by phishing somebody, right? Creating a pretty believable email and then getting into the repository that they maintained. That shows us that there's going to be a focus on our supply chains. SolarWinds was another example. There's the near miss of XZ utilities, where the kind of the Unix build was going to have a backdoor, and it did have for a few small releases, right? Those kind of things, the high-end actors are going to be focused on them. It's clear that they already are, and we're going to need to understand and build some resiliency into the environment to both find and deal with the inevitable supply chain in our software.
All right. Well, at that note, that positive note, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, Rob, for coming out, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks.